Good morning. Can you hear me? Is that going to be good? Yeah? You got to respond. Yeah? Okay, that's good. It's going to be a long day if you don't respond. Okay. All right. She said I've been teaching 48 years. I just want you to know I started when I was 5. Just in case you're doing the math there. I have, in fact, been teaching 48 years. I started teaching high school Spanish in 1964. And after doing graduate work at UCLA in linguistics and comparing and contrasting Spanish and English grammar, it's always been my thing, grammar has. And so when there were 35,000 teachers out of work in Southern California, as there are now, in 1976, and I wanted to go back to teaching full-time, I decided to go to court reporting school. And I always say, because my ex-husband played volleyball at the beach, I live a couple miles from the beach, and he would come home from school and stop at the beach and play volleyball and come on home. And he came in one day and he said, you know what? I think you should check out court reporting. He said, I don't know what they do, but they're always at the beach playing volleyball. So whatever they do, they have time to play volleyball every day. And that was his dream, was to play volleyball every day. So I did, in fact, for that very reason, check out court reporting school. There was one 5 miles from my house. I went to court reporting school. I took the English exam because I didn't want to take the English class. And 3 months later, I was teaching the English class. And here I am, 36 years later. So English has always been my thing. And she said that you came just to get your CEUs. I know you came because you love English. Right? Okay. So in here, I want to know who really does love English. Like, this is just cool. Okay, that's good, because it's going to be a long afternoon if you're not at least mildly fond of it here. And I always say, I was in, where was I? I think it was Colorado a couple of weeks ago, about 3 weeks ago, and I always say that, you know, who really loves English? And 2 people, 2 out of like 50 maybe, or 60, only 2? I thought, oh, we really could have a long afternoon here. So I want you today, and tomorrow morning, I'll be back tomorrow morning, I want all of you to at least mildly be fond of English, and at least mildly say, this is what I say, I understand all of that technology is really, really important, that everything you're doing with your fingers is important, but the reality is you get paid for the transcript. You get paid when you turn out a product. And so in my book, the most important thing you do is turn out a good transcript, because that's what you're judged by, that's what your name goes on the front. They don't know about your fingers. They don't understand. Does anybody understand outside of this field and how this works? I'm on a lot of airplanes, guys. I was in 22 states last year. This is my 7th this year. And so I'm on a lot of airplanes. They always say, you know, you're sitting next to somebody. They say, what do you do? Where are you going? Oh, I'm going to Tennessee. What are you going to do? I'm going to give a seminar. Oh, what do you give seminars in? What do I say? I say, I teach court reporting. Lots of times that doesn't register. So you have to go what? I teach court reporting, the little machine. And they say, oh, yeah, always wondered how that works. Don't want to tell you how it works. I want to read. I'm on an airplane. I like to read. Okay, then I say, and I teach, they have to turn out a transcript, a script of what they do, and I teach them how to punctuate that transcript. And they always say, I say, it's a little teeny square of the world. I mean, really, in the great big world, this is one teeny little square. It's my thing, but it's a teeny little square of the world. But you get paid based on this transcript. And I always say it is your ability to do word pairs. It is having here and here correct, and flare and bizarre and all those. It is your ability to put in punctuation that does not distract the person, that lets the reading flow, and it is your job to tell the story of what went on. And that's why you put in little blurbs that say, they approached the bench, whatever. And so I believe this is the most important thing. I know people who teach CAT think that's the most important thing. It's clearly not. I mean, it just isn't, is it? I mean, really. This is the most important thing. And how many of you are on Facebook? Is anybody my friend on Facebook? Okay, yeah? Okay, you need to be my friend on Facebook, because when I get home on Monday, I'm going to have a blog. Just what I need. But I'm going to have a blog that's going to be tied to my Facebook page, and we're going to be able to discuss all of this, because we all know that when we go to lunch together, two of us go to lunch together, the conversation always turns to what? Do you put a comma after such and such, right? And you say, I don't know, what's the rule, do you think? And you guys discuss it, and as a group of two, you come to a conclusion. And you say, yes, I am going to put a comma after X. And then you go to lunch with someone else, right? Don't you go to lunch then with someone else a couple of days later? And what do you say to them? You know what, so-and-so and I were discussing the other day that we're going to put a comma here, and then that person decides he too is going to put a comma here, and thus rules develop. Okay? Isn't that true? Rules develop, and what I can tell you is that when I am in a place like this, you guys often are kind of do things similarly, but you don't do things like the people in Wisconsin. Why not? You didn't go to lunch together, right? I mean, truly, you didn't go to lunch with the people in Wisconsin, and so you haven't really decided on that. So with all of that said, guys, I want to say this morning, or this afternoon and tomorrow morning as we discuss this, everybody in the room will love it for just a little while, okay? You will say, okay, I'm here. And I hate to tell you this. I hate to tell you two things. One is, you do not have your own personal rules. There is no such thing as, well, I'm using court reporting English here. No, there is no such thing as court reporting English. There is English. There are the rules for English. And in reporting, we have to tweak them sometimes. But we don't have our own set. There's no such thing, okay? So we have English rules, which occasionally we have to tweak for court reporting purposes. Lots of times we just use the same rules everyone else uses. It's just like that. And I want all of you to know that it is not a rule to say, I like it, right? If you like it, I'm glad you like it, but if it's not the rule, it's not the rule. I like it this way is not going to fly, all right? And so we're going to get over that because it's going to be a long afternoon here. All right. This is the name of my book. I'm going to talk about my book at one point a little bit later. I have order forms for my book. You save half of the shipping if you order it today. And it is called Court Reporting, Bad Grammar, Good Punctuation, because I believe that's the definition of court reporting. Court reporting is, in fact, bad grammar to which we apply good punctuation. Yeah, to which we punctuate well. We are not in the business of changing their grammar, though we would like to, right? And we apply good punctuation to that. So I start all seminars. I was here many years ago, I think. I'm not really sure. When your convention was at a state park and it had a conference grounds and a lake. It was beautiful. Was anybody there? And there was a fire alarm in the middle of the night. We all had to go outside in our pajamas. Was anybody there? Yeah, see, now you remember. Yeah, that was, how many years ago was that? Had to be at least 10 years ago. Anyway, okay, so I always start a seminar, all seminars that I give, with this idea, because how many comma rules are there, do you think, offhand? How many comma rules are there? Come on, how many do you think? 293? 745? I don't know. I'm looking for an answer here. But the point is what? There are a whole bunch of comma rules. They all fall into two categories. And I want you, if you don't go away with anything else, and you have here the pictures of the slides, the handouts, so that you can take notes. They're numbered down in the corner, so that you can take notes on what I'm going through if you like. Okay, so every comma in the language that we use is based upon one of two things. I would like you to go away from here tomorrow or Sunday when you all leave and say, okay, I am either separating two things, I'm putting in a comma because I am pushing them apart, or I am surrounding something with a pair of commas. So I'm either pushing two things apart or I am surrounding something. There is no other way that we use commas. So when you are thinking about putting in a comma, just one single comma, know that you are separating two things and you are pushing it apart. If you're going to surround something, know that you could take that out of the sentence and you would still have a grammatical sentence left. You're doing one of two things. Every comma you have in your transcript is one of those two. And because I was never a court reporter, about 15 years ago probably, maybe 20, I decided I would proofread. And so for 12 years I proofread. I proofread a woman who does about 20 to 22,000 pages a year, so I proofread really a lot. Proofread for 4 or 5 reporters in my 15 years of proofreading. And this is what I wrote on the transcript. I would say to them, you get 2 or you get 0. What am I saying? I'm saying that you need to either surround this thing or you need to leave the commas out altogether. It is putting in one comma that gets us in trouble. So I always start nicely so that we all agree right off the bat. Okay, everybody likes the comma after April 7, right? Not a soul in the room wants to take that comma out. Is that correct? You have to respond. Yes, okay. And everybody likes it between El Paso and Texas, right? Yes, okay. And everybody likes it before the word sir. Yeah? Could be the last time today we all agree, but there we are. And we're not going to cap sir, ever, unless it's Sir John Gielgud or Sir Elton John. We're not going to cap that word. Someone said that when it's the, I got a question a couple weeks ago, if it's the judge and you were saying sir to the judge, it needs to be capped. See, I told you, somebody went to lunch and had a discussion and decided they were going to do that. No, that doesn't work, guys. Okay. Now, I always take this opportunity because there are some comma rules that never quite fit in anywhere else. So I always take this opportunity to teach a couple of comma rules. That first thing up there, that have you, everybody agree with that comma? Yes, no one uses a semicolon, right? Okay. That comma, that little thing on the end, this is what we do in English. We all do it because we speak the language. We tend to set a pattern of whatever it is we want to say. And then we tend to cut it down and cut it down. And so if the witness says, if the doctor on the stand says, the temperature of the patient on the day he was admitted to the hospital in June was 105. If he wants to talk about blood pressure, the chances are he will not say what? The blood pressure of the patient on the day was, what does he say? Blood pressure? And then the number, whatever the number is. We tend to establish our pattern and then cut to the chase. Okay, so here, this is really a cutting down, the second part, of the first sentence. It's really, you haven't paid off that credit card. Have you paid off that credit card? It's really a telescoping of the second sentence into the first one. It is called, this little thing right here, the have you, it's called a tag clause. And a tag clause is something that turns a statement into a question. And we all know that attorneys, are there any attorneys in the room? We don't want to say anything bad about any attorneys because we love them, do we not? Oh, yes, I thought so. We love attorneys because they make our living, right? You make mine, they make yours, etc. Okay, guys, this is what an attorney should do. If he's going to ask a question, which is his business, what should he do with the subject and verb? He should flip it over. He should not say, it was Friday. He should say what? Wasn't it Friday? Or was it Friday? And instead, he says, it was Friday. He says, John worked in the mill. Then what does he have to do if he wants that to be a question? Well, he has to kind of tack on something right here. He has to do something to make it into a question. Some attorneys we know kind of use their voice, right? And they say, you left on Friday? And some attorneys do that all the time. Drives you crazy, doesn't it? That sing-songy stuff? Okay. And generally you put a question mark anyway because you kind of know he's asking a question. But the other thing he can do is he can use this little kind of a tag clause. So, John worked at the mill, didn't he? It was late in the day, wasn't it? And those are called tag clauses. They're a telescoped form of the first sentence, and their only purpose is to show that he's asking a question. If they have the verb from this first part, the have from up here, then they always take a comma. Always. They take commas in the middle, they take commas at the end, they always take a comma. We set? So there's a rule. You can jot that down. Most of you do that. It never, ever, ever takes a semicolon. And we can talk about right, true, and correct at another time. Maybe a little later in the morning, afternoon. I keep thinking, I haven't been up a while, actually. Okay, second one, crazy, crazy, crazy. Same word, same function, right after it, always a comma, okay? And the last one is called exorbitant inflated fees, is called a coordinate adjective. You put commas between them. What did your English teacher tell you about these? How did she tell you to recognize when a comma goes there? If you can, what? If you can put an and in between them, and if you can, what? Flip them over. Yep. So can you say exorbitant and inflated fees? Can you say inflated and exorbitant fees? That's when you put the comma. It's called a coordinate adjective. And another little clue, guys, is usually they're synonyms. Usually they mean the same thing, or they mean something very, very similar. So a tag clause, okay, that has the sentence sort of telescoped. Same word, same function, and coordinate adjectives. 3 little comma rules there. Any questions? Because if you don't ask questions this afternoon, it's going to be a very long afternoon. We need to have that discussion. It's as if we're all having lunch together, right? All right. And then, again, we're talking about commas that push 2 things apart. Now, I've already said that we tend to telescope the language. We tend to say our first thing and cut it down. That's what's going on here. She usually came in on Mondays or Tuesdays, what? She seldom came in on Fridays. It's that same idea of 2 sentences, and in English we tend to cut that second one down. I believe it was Gary. I don't think it was Ray. I don't believe it was Ray. There were always 5 of them. There were never more than 5 of them. And instead of doing that, we telescope the second sentence into it. These are called, this is slide number 8, these are called contrasting elements. Contrasting elements begin with one of 4 words: not, never, seldom, and rather. Not, never, seldom, and rather. And they always have something after them that contrasts to the thing in front of them. So Fridays contrast to Tuesdays and Mondays. Ray contrasts to Gary. They always, always, always take commas, always. Take a comma, a separating comma. My question is, what if the word but were in there? She usually came in on Mondays or Tuesdays, but seldom Fridays. What if there's a but? Is there a comma? No, there is not. Anybody want to talk about that? Anybody? All right. I believe it was Gary, but not Ray, not a comma. And not Ray, not a comma. Comma when there's no conjunction in these, when we're just going to telescope them together. All right. This is a rule that's seldom taught. Seldom taught. She handed me her laptop, her iPhone. Okay? Now, what goes in there? We have a comma. What should go in there? An and. And sometimes we don't use the and. This is like a series which we're going to be talking about later in the afternoon. But people just talk this way. I mean, if I were writing a letter, if I were writing a business letter, I wouldn't do this probably. I would put in the and, right? I would say she handed me her laptop and her iPhone. But when I don't put it in, and there's still only 2 of them, it's not a series, when I don't put it in, that comma is because we don't want those two things to sit on top of each other. Laptop and iPhone are two different things, right? And we don't want those two to crash into each other, and so we put a comma to separate them. It is called the comma of omission. What's omitted? The and, or the but, or the or maybe, but certainly the and. It was traveling at a high rate, careened around the corner. We're separating the two verbs in this case. Not great English, not the way we would want to write our PhD thesis. But the reality is that this is what somebody says, this comma goes there to separate those two verbs. They can't sit on top of each other. You cannot say, he drove to the corner, turned. He drove to the corner and turned, but not just turned. And this is called the comma of omission. We said that he was not there, that we didn't know where he was. And when we, a little bit later when we talk about this, this is going to extend into lots and lots of things that we might say. We said that he was not there, that we didn't know where he was, that he left early, that he. Those are all commas of omission for the conjunction that ought to be there. Okay, questions? None? I'm telling you. You don't really want to hear me talk constantly this afternoon. All right. Okay, and then we have the commas that come in pairs. Now, there's been a discussion on Facebook this week, a massive discussion on Facebook about essential and non-essential. We're going to talk about it later. But what I want to say is when you put a pair of commas around something, you are not saying it's not needed in the sentence. That's what someone was arguing. Every time she puts a pair of commas, she thinks that that means that the sentence is just fine without what's in between the commas. It's just fine in that it is a sentence. It is not just fine in terms of the information. Information might go away if you took that thing out. That doesn't mean that you're not supposed to put commas around it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later when we talk about essential and non-essential. But the reality is, I want you to think, if I put a pair of commas around something, what I am saying is that can be lifted out and a sentence remains. Of course the sentence doesn't have as much information in it when you've taken out a part of it. Sometimes that information is really not crucial. Other times you really need that information. It's not about, I need it so I can't put commas around it. We have people calling prepositional phrases essential. No, there's no such thing as an essential prepositional phrase. So I want to dispel the notion that if you say there are commas around something, that means that it has to go out of the sentence and the sentence has all the stuff it needs without it. To be a sentence, it has all the stuff. That doesn't mean that the information is not missing. So we're going to surround certain things, and we're going to go back with our original thing and say, how many of you put the commas around the year when it follows the date? How many of you do? How many of you do not? Some of you didn't vote. How many of you do? How many of you do not? Okay, those commas go there. That's an English rule. Those commas go there. I would encourage you to put them there simply because it's a rule, right? And sometimes we just follow the rules, okay? And this is where I would say to you, I don't like the rule is not okay. I don't like all of the rules either, but if it's a rule, it's a rule. And that comma goes there. Did you have a question? Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I will put a comma after the year in that instance. All right. Okay. Everybody hear her? She wants this thing, April 7, 2011, to be an adjective in front of a noun. And because it's an adjective, she doesn't want the second comma, because there's a rule that says you never put a comma between the adjective and the noun it modifies. So a whole bunch of people decided they're not going to put it there. Okay, so April 7, comma, 2011, comma, or not, letter. How many of you put the comma? Yes, I do. How many of you do not? Okay, you have a choice there in some ways. I recommend you do, because I think this is you're putting in 2 commas, which means you could put the year out of there and it's gone, and I think it should be there. But I understand the thinking, and as long as you are consistent about that, I think it's fine to leave it out. When this thing here is a unit, April 7, 2011 is a unit in front of a noun. April 7, 2011, letter. You're saying, I want to leave out the second one, not a problem. Yeah, not a problem. You're running up what's happening, and there's sort of 2 rules that run up against each other. And we're going to say the same thing about the comma after Texas. Okay, if it is an El Paso, Texas location, okay, you could take that comma out. This is what I want all of you to do, though. If you're going to do it, how many of you have a proofreader? How many of you have a scopist? Okay. I'm going to just ask. How many of you do all your work on your own, never ever let anybody else see it? Okay. We'll talk about that later. I think there are real reasons for letting somebody else see it, guys. And that would be starting with, it's those fresh eyes. You know, when I used to get jobs. This is part of it. You guys were there. So you know what they were wearing. You know that they were tall or short or blonde or whatever. You know exactly where everybody was sitting. So you have a picture playing in your head. Now you're scoping your job. Okay, so you're scoping and you kind of smile. Oh yeah, I remember the way he said this right here. Everybody was laughing. And you go on because you have the picture, the movie playing in your head. Now you're going to proof it. I do hope you're going to proof it now. So now you're going to proof that job, and you're on time 3. You've memorized part of it. You tend to skip right on over it because you've been through it. You know what they look like. If you, on the other hand, gave it to me to proofread for you, okay, I wasn't there. I don't know. I get to make up what they looked like. I have no idea what they looked like. I don't know what the setting was. I don't know. Every once in a while, somebody on Facebook posts where they were for their job, and here's the, in our case, the view of the ocean, and they're downtown on a big high-rise, and I don't know that. You could have been in a hovel as far as I know. And on the very first page of a job for my court reporter, and by the way, she's a fabulous court reporter. She is really, really bright. She knows the English rules, etc. She had something about being here, H-E-A-R. Now, does she know that? Well, of course she does. She knows the difference between here and here. What happened? What happened? She just missed it. Why did she miss it? Well, it was right at the bottom of the first page, right at the very smack second to the last word on the first page. You tend to miss errors. Errors that are there that you overlook tend to be where when you proofread? At the end of the line on the end of the page. Why? Because your brain's already gone on to the next line or the next page, and your eyes are still seeing it, but your brain's not engaged anymore. You're turning the page, or you're doing whatever. So most errors that are missed are toward the end of a line or beginning of a line, and at the end of the page and beginning of the page. It's that process that you're going through. So does she know the difference between here and here, guys? Of course she does. What happened? She just missed it. Fortunately, I caught it. I could miss it too. We can all miss things. But I so encourage all of you to think about having a proofreader. Yes? Question? She proofreads before she sends it to me. Oh yeah, she's what we call anal. Yeah, she proofreads before she sends it to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah, anybody who works that much, you bet. Yeah, no, she proofreads it before she sends it to me. She scopes it, she prints it, and proofreads it, puts the corrections in, and then sends it to me. Yeah, and she doesn't sleep. No, she doesn't sleep. Yeah, she just works. Yeah, yes. Okay. Is there ever a situation where it's correct not to put that comma? Yeah. The of changes it. Yeah. April 7 of 2011, there are no commas anywhere. Yeah. Or, you know, yeah. That when you have an of, there is no comma. In this situation as it is here, there's never a time when that is not correct. That is always correct, yeah. Over here, did I see a hand? Okay. So the comma after Texas is the same as the comma after 2011. It belongs there. You need to surround Texas. Texas is in a positive, more or less, to the city. And I always say when my older son, my kids are rather old now, but when they were young, and Scott was in 4th grade, he was doing the capitals of all the states, you know. Sacramento, California is, and he hadn't put in the second comma after all the states. So I, the dutiful mother going over his homework, said what? A comma needs to go here, and I explained the rule to him, et cetera, and he goes off to school. A couple of days later, he comes home with the paper, he throws it on the table, and makes mom a 5-syllable word, mom. And they never really truly appreciated that I helped him with their grammar when they were speaking, ever. And so the 4th grade teacher had what? In great big red felt pen, crossed out all the commas after the states. So I was forced to go down to the school. Well, of course. And by the way, I believe we're all forced to do that. That is our obligation in this world. I went down, I Xeroxed 3 English books that showed that the comma goes there, and I gently, ever so gently, explained to her. It was early in the year. My kid had to be with her all year. I just said, you know, this is the rule. She was very grateful. She said, I'm a 4th grade teacher. I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know everything about punctuation. From now on, I'll teach it. And guys, I believe that we have an obligation to save this beautiful language. What's going to kill it? What's going to kill this language? Texting. Texting is going to kill it. How many of us put commas and periods and question marks in our texts? Of course we do. Don't you think it was not nice of them to put all that on another screen? So you have to go to another screen to put in a comma or an apostrophe. I mean, really. I find myself writing do not, so I don't have to go to the other screen to write don't. Because can I absolutely ever not put in the punctuation? No. So I don't text a lot. I'm not very good at it. But I truly believe that texting is a threat to this very language. I have a 19-year-old grandson that I'm pretty sure thinks wood is spelled W-U-D. I'm not so concerned about the for and, you know, you for you. I'm really more concerned about the words that are getting truncated or misspelled. I'm not kidding. I think texting may kill it. But I do believe, and I do this, I know the number to the Channel 4 News at home, the newsroom, because I am lying there one night, just about asleep, and they say, stay tuned after the commercial for a discussion of when you think teenagers should discuss having sex with their parents. And I'm thinking, what? So now I'm awake. Okay, so during the next part, they don't tell us about having sex with their parents, and she repeated exactly the same words. Okay, now it should have been discuss having sex with their parents. Somehow that modifier needed to be somewhere else, didn't it? Okay, so I call the newsroom at 11:30 at night, and I say, excuse me, but when Sonny Bono died, they put on the screen, actually printed across the screen, that his internment was going to be whenever. Internment? That's what we did to the Japanese during World War II. They didn't mean internment. What did they mean? The next morning it was corrected. I called him in the evening, and the next morning when they did the same thing, it was corrected. It was now his interment. There's a learning curve that we in this room probably care more about the language than anybody on the planet. And we need to disseminate this information. That's why I'm here, in reality. I'm really too old to be doing this, okay? I'm telling you. This is my birthday month, and this is a round one. Now, you can all do that math about that 42 years. I'm going to be 70 at the end of this month. There are people my age who are, thank you. There are people my age who are retired. They're sitting somewhere on the beach, I'm very sure. And so the reality is, we have an obligation to keep this language going. We have an obligation to say to children, what? Whatever, right? Whatever we need to tell them about this language. Because we're losing it, guys. We are truly losing it, and particularly with those texts, I have to say. All right, so does this comma go there? Yes, it absolutely does. Does the comma go, do the commas go around sir? They do. And you just want to be sure that you're putting a pair and not putting one to separate. Okay, council is called what? What is it called? Come on. Where are my grammar people? Nobody likes it now, right? It's called direct address, or a noun of address. It's the word we use when we're talking to somebody and calling them by something. Why do I have it capped? Do I correctly have it capped? Yes, because titles in direct address are capped. If it were in the middle of the sentence, it would not be. And now I want to look at two things. If I had my way, I would be here the whole time, right? We wouldn't have those other speakers. Hope none of them are in the room, but we wouldn't have other speakers. We would just have English all afternoon today, all day tomorrow, and all morning on Sunday. How many are with me? Okay, the 4 of you who want that, we'll do that on our own. I believe that one of our problems, do we have students? Do we have students here? Are there any students? Yes, a student. Are you Erica? She's from my school. I did consulting work for College of Court Reporting in Hobart, Indiana, online. Hi, Erica. Erica and I are having dinner tonight. Okay, so we've just Erica, is that it? Do we have any other students? Oh, over here. Fabulous. Where do you go to school? Where? And is there a school here in Tennessee? In Memphis. Okay. All right. So, if I had my way, we would spend probably 4 or 5 hours just on sentences and how sentences work and how clauses inside of sentences work. And we could do that. I've done it. And the reality is that's what we have here. We have this, since he had been there just a month, that's a dependent clause in the middle of a sentence. What's our sentence? What's the sentence? He was not eligible to be promoted. If we are writing our PhD thesis, we are not going to word it this way, are we? We are going to put, since he had been there just a month, where? At the beginning or at the end. This is the last place we'd want to put it. So we're going to say he was not eligible to be promoted since he had been there just a month. Or we're going to say since he had been there just a month, but this is the worst place to put it. And I'm really not here to bash attorneys, and this is what I would say to all of you. If you've never done what I'm doing right now, you get up on your feet and you start talking about something you know about. You start talking. I'm always worried about that guy back there who's filming this, I believe, because you guys may listen to this. Is that why you're filming it? Are they going to listen to it sometime? Okay, so let's say you're listening to it, and you're going to hear a grammar mistake. And I'm going to just be rolling over because, yikes, I hate to make grammar mistakes. I'm up here as a grammar person, right? Hate it. But I'm talking off the top of my head, and sometimes that's going to happen. I always say I've come a long way. You can all. How many of you work on your spoken language ever? Are you aware of how you speak? And by the way, you guys have a bit of an accent, I must say. And I want to talk to you about y'all or you all and whether you make that. I've seen it hyphenated, Y-O-U-A-L-L. And then, so my husband and I are discussing last night at dinner, how do you distinguish between you all hyphenated and y'all, which I believe you spell Y''A''L'. Do you guys make a distinction there? I figured you did. Yep. And you guys don't have a long I noticed. You don't say right. Right? You say what? Rat. Rat. Mm-hmm. And I love you, okay? I was in Alabama 3 or 4 years ago, and a guy said to me, "You have a lovely accent." thought, I have an accent? I think it's you that have an accent. Anyway. So if we're going to take this clause and put it at the end, that's where it belongs. And things that are where they belong often don't take any punctuation, most of the time. So if it said he was not eligible to be promoted since he had been there just a month, there is no punctuation in front of that clause. If the clause starts with because, there's still no punctuation. Lots of you like a comma before because for some reason. There's no comma. So he was not eligible to be promoted because he had been there just a month. There's no comma there. And there's rarely a comma in front of because, almost never. And if it were out in the front, what would we do? Since he had been there just a month, what? Comma. Why are you putting a comma? I want you to think about this stuff. You're putting a comma there because you want to slow your reader down just a bit because he's coming up on the subject and verb in the sentence. That's really, these rules have a reason. Many of them have a reason. He's coming up on the subject and verb in the sentence. And if we're going to put it in the middle, we're going to surround it. Yes? Okay, she wants a question mark after the first sentence. Is that what you want too? Okay, we want a question mark. Okay, he thinks it depends on what the answer is. Okay. This is called a polite request. A polite request begins with will or would. And this is the way I want you to think about it. I have a wonderful, charming, adorable husband. Okay, he's going to come down later. He's heard me speak a lot of times. He'll be down about 5 after 4, about 10 minutes to go, and then he says to people, I was there. No, you weren't. You weren't there. Okay, so he's a fabulous guy. And he's fully retired. And by the way, when he comes in, I want you all to notice, he's African American, he's tall, he's got white hair. He's almost 80. I want you to notice that when he comes in, because he's in fabulous shape. Okay. But I need to tell you before he gets here. Okay, so this is the deal. Oftentimes I say to him, bring me whatever it is, okay? Bring me my computer. Bring me my whatever. Get me, and that's a command form. That's do it, right? Bring me, get me. A little softer form of the command is would you. Would you bring my computer to me? I am not expecting him to say what? Don't think so. It's a happy marriage. He didn't say that. Okay? I am also not expecting him to say, sure, I'll do that, and then sit there like a bump. What am I expecting? I am expecting him to do something. Bring me a glass of water. Bring me my computer. I'm all settled in. I've got my computer and everything. Oh, I forgot my mouse. Would you bring me my mouse? Would you bring me my mouse? I am never for 1 second expecting him to say no. Not for a second. And I'm not expecting him to say yes and then sit there like a bump. That is called a polite request. So the attorney says to the witness, state your name for the record. That's a command form. Do it. You state your name for the record. If he wants to be just a teeny bit nicer, he says what? Would you state your name for the record? He is not expecting a negative response. He is not expecting a positive response. He is expecting the name. In this sentence, would you show me the document you're holding? I think he's simply asking without telling him to show him the document. I think it's a polite request all the way. I don't think there's ever a question mark here. Would you show me the document you're holding is just a little bit longer and nicer, more polite form of what? Show me the document, right? Show me the document. My mother always told me I had a smart mouth. I don't think it was a compliment. And she always said, you're blunt like your father. Okay, so I won't use the command form. I will use the would you please form. It is a polite request, just like saying to someone, do it. So would you bring the car around? Am I expecting the guy at the door to say, no. That's called a polite request. I think that's what this is. There's certainly some gray areas, but I think that's what this is, and I would put a period. Question? Yes. Yes. Sometimes, is it wrong to put a question mark at the end of a true polite request? Yes, it is. Now, so let's see. How many of you think that is simply a polite request to the other attorney to show him the document? Okay? If it is, then it's a period. I don't really think it's a question. And again, you might have somebody say, would you show me that document? In other words, do I get to see it? Maybe. But I think most of the time a polite request correctly begins with will or would. And if it's simply, would you turn to page 5? I think that's a polite request all the way. I think it takes a period. If truly you think there's some distinction, this is one of the things I want to always say to all of you. Sometimes we think we are so smart, and we are just so sophisticated with this punctuation. I'm thinking the rest of the world doesn't notice. You know, to me, this is a polite request. Someone always asks about this sentence, because I start every seminar with this, but I do believe that it is a polite request, and you'd put a period. If you think there's a doubt because of the way it's said, because I wasn't there, again, I wasn't there, and I'm really not sure, but by the way it's said, maybe it could be. Do I get to see it? Would you show it to me? If it's said like that, certainly it's a question. Yes? Oh, but yeah, you can create any kind of circumstance that you want. I'm saying, would you state your name for the record? You can say yes, but that's not the response that guy was looking for, and I think it's more on the person who's really making that request. In my book, it's somebody saying, would you state your name for the record? To me, that could never, ever be a question, ever. At the beginning of a deposition, at the beginning of a court case, would you state your name for the record? To me, could never be a question. It is always a polite request. It correctly starts with would or will. Yeah, could you state your name for the record? To me, is still a polite request. Yeah, I would still put a period, absolutely. Yeah, the could and can becomes because what do could and can both mean? What do those both mean? They mean, are you physically able to do it? Well, he's not saying, are you physically able? And somebody's going to say, well, but what if it's a person who yeah, guys, I know. Generally speaking, this is a polite request, yes. You need to be a little bit louder. Yeah, some people say that when you're talking to the judge, for example, you don't make a polite request because you can't really do that of the judge. I think you can. You know, may we mark this for identification? I think that's a polite request. That it's to the judge, but it's still, he's not mark it for identification. Is he expecting the judge to say, no, I'm not doing that? Yeah. And again, there are certainly, and sometimes my example of this gentleman over here said, it depends on how the witness answers it. If you say, would you give me the names of everybody who was in the car? And the witness said, I don't really know who they were. Or the witness says, John, Joe, Ted, and Bill. You might punctuate one with an interrog and one with a period. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so our clause. If we are going to take this, clause, which belongs at the end, and stick it in the middle, we are going to put commas around it. We are going to surround it. So that if we lifted it out, we still need the information, but if we lifted it out, we have a sentence. And same thing with the last one, which is now a prepositional phrase, a couple of them with another clause. What's the sentence in the last one? She was unemployed. That's the sentence. And if that's the sentence, where does all of this stuff usually go? At the end. It's usually she was unemployed at the time of this accident that we are discussing. If it goes at the end, it has nothing. If it goes at the beginning, it has a comma after it. If it goes in the middle, it has commas around it. Okay. Are there any questions? Yes?
That thing about counsel, if you change that to judge, would you capitalize?
If you what?
Would you capitalize the day? You know, would you show me judge?
I'm sorry, I still didn't. Oh, if it's, Oh, if it said, yeah, that would be good. If it said judge instead of counsel, judge is always capped in direct address, not in the,
If it's full name, you know, Judge Jones, and they said, "Would you show me that judge?" I will check.
it should be. Title,
Now, Your Honor is, like, if you say
mhm.
Your Honor, now that's capped. And then you say judge without the full name.
If it's in direct address, it's capped. Just like counsel in direct address is capped with the commas around it. I want to know now, judge, whether you blah, blah, blah. But I spoke to the judge yesterday afternoon, not capped. So judge is like any other title. Titles are capped in front of the name, Judge Jones, Counsel Smith. They're capped in direct address, commas around them because you're using them in direct address, and not in context. That's the way lieutenant, sergeant, all those titles are capped. Direct address, yes. I want to know, sergeant, whether you blah, 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 commas around it, capped. In the middle of the sentence, no. Same with judge. And Your Honor, now, it makes no sense. I mean, if we try to explain this to a student, it makes absolutely no sense that Your Honor is always capped, but judge is only capped when it's in direct address or in front of the name. There's an inconsistency there. It's the way it is. Do you guys cap the Y in Your Honor? Do you all cap the Y? There are places that they do not. It is a regional thing. We cap it in Southern California. They don't cap it in Northern California. Honor always, but not the Y of your or the Y or the H of his. Just one of those things. If you travel around the way I do, you get a real feel for what people are doing. In 2 weeks, I'm going to be in North Dakota. What do you think? Yay, we have a North Dakota person. Okay. All right, guys. Now we're going to talk about basically the word and. We're going to kind of work the word and in here, and we're going to talk about some things about it. I want to define this, and again, I want to go back to what I said earlier, because this discussion has been ongoing about, and people keep saying, but if I put commas around it, it's not essential. That's not the way it works, and I want to just kind of keep clearing that up. A parenthetical is any kind of an element which can be dropped into any sentence that we say. It doesn't really add a lot of meaning. So we have the in my opinion kind. That would be in my opinion, in my judgment, all of those. We have the by the way, at any rate, in conclusion kind. And we have the G and the say kind. Okay, these are all kinds of parentheticals. And this is where we talk about to or none. And we're going to, when we talk about these parentheticals, we're going to talk about putting commas around them. But first, let's look at this. We say, I want to learn specifically, so we don't get 1. Do we get 0 or do we get 2? What do you think? Okay, how many vote for 2, the second sentence? How many vote for 2? How many vote for none? Okay, yeah. There's really no need, specifically it's just an adverb, no need to put commas around it that I know of. Okay, so there's the correctly punctuated one. All right, how about somewhat later? Anybody want commas around somewhat later? Can't have 1. Okay, you want commas around somewhat later? Who wants them? Yes? Who doesn't want them? Everybody has to vote. Who wants them? Who wants commas here? All right, then I want to know why. Why do you want commas? Because the more you know rules and why you're doing something, the more you can explain it to your proofreader and or your scopist, and the more you will be consistent within your own transcript about the way you punctuate, and the more you will be, when you go to lunch, sure of what you're going to tell your friend. Okay? All right, so why? Okay, because you can remove it from the sentence and still have a sentence. All right? Why else? Yes? It's modifying detected. Later's modifying detected, somewhat's modifying later. Defining a time period. Those two comments, defining a time period and modifying detected, those make it an adverb. Makes the word later an adverb. Somewhat's an adverb modifying later. Later's an adverb modifying detected. Do we usually put commas around adverbs? Adverbs are the tricky part of the language in that adjectives are pretty predictable about where they are and what they do. Adverbs kind of float all over the sentence. They kind of look like those parenthetical things. Okay? This is a plain old adverb. How many of you would put commas around it if the somewhat weren't there? He detected later a certain hostility. How many of you would put it there? Okay, I'm going to say these are just adverbs and there is no need to put commas around them. It isn't about, could I take it out and have a sentence? Yeah. Okay, but they're just adverbial and they don't really need any commas around them. All right, now, yes, question. Is the reason you're putting it in is what? Yeah, I'm not putting it in because it's an adverb. It's right pretty much where it belongs. Adverbs belong after the verb. Generally speaking, we just don't put commas around those. That's what specifically was too. Yeah, they're just in the sentence. Adverbs get to be anywhere they want. That could have been out in the front, it could have been later, but it's still just an adverb and it's short. It's not that the sentence is short, but it's kind of short. Okay, how about referring to May 3? Anybody know what that is? Any real grammar buffs that know what that is? It's a participle. Heard of participles? How many of you have heard of participles? Yay, heard of participles. Participles end in ing or ed, and they come from the verb. Refer is the verb. Referring is a participle. Could also be the verb. How many of you love grammar? Now, see, a little while ago, we had tons of you. Now we've lost a bunch of people. I've killed them already. All right. Referring to May 3 as a participle, we need commas around it. We need, I am asking, referring to October 3, whether he was drunk. The sentence is, I'm asking whether he was drunk. Where does the referring thing normally go? Out in the front. Referring to October 3, I'm asking whether he was drunk. Or where? At the end. It goes one of those two places. It doesn't belong in the middle. And notice again, I've surrounded it with commas. If I take it out, I have a sentence. Do I have all of the information I have with it in there? No, but that doesn't make it non-essential necessarily. So I'm going to keep pounding on that. All right, now we have who worked in shipping. What's that? Anybody know? Grammar, I'm losing my grammar buffs by the second here. That's a dependent clause, modifies Roy Tan. It's an adjective clause. Do we like it with commas or without? With. Because it follows a proper name, we have it with these two commas. Okay, and in each case, we're rejecting the single comma. We are rejecting separating things with the comma. All right, and sometimes, here we go, will you state your name? I'm going to say that's a polite request. What about the word please? When do we put a comma? What about at the beginning? Please state your name. Comma? No. What about in the middle? Usually not. Would you, if it just said, will you please state your name, there isn't. But if it comes sort of at a junction in the sentence, there might be. And what about at the end? Yeah, it always takes a comma at the end. The word please at the end of the sentence always takes a comma. So there was one comma, the sentence is going to go on, we need to add another one. We can't now have the single separating comma. Yes? If Your Honor, please. If Your Honor, please is a whole clause. Your Honor is the subject and please is the verb. It's a sort of an idiomatic expression for if it pleases Your Honor.
They will also then say, Your Honor, please.
They're going to say, Your Honor, please. Well, they're not going to. I can't say it like that. Your Honor, please. If it please the court is the same as if Your Honor. They're just going to say, please the court. You know what? I'm going to think about that, but I think I'm going to punctuate that the same way I would if he said the whole thing. If he said, if it please the court, comma, blah, 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 and he just says, please the court, I think I'm going to punctuate it the same way. Please the court, comma, blah, blah, blah. Your Honor, please, blah, blah, blah. Short for if Your Honor, please. Yeah, and you guys just write it regularly is what I want to know. You write it as if he said Your Honor, even though he slurs it all together. Is that the way you all write it? I'm just checking. Because I'm not from Tennessee. I'm actually from Indiana, though. That's not too far away, right? I was born in Indiana, and I grew up on a working farm in Indiana outside about 50 miles from Indianapolis. So I'm not too far away from you. But until you get into southern Indiana, you don't have that accent, right? Pretty much. Southern Indiana, it might as well be Kentucky and on down into you guys here. But you have a distinct accent from Kentucky, too, don't you? Don't you? Yeah, you have your own private accent. All right, so you do really right, Your Honor, even though he says what this man said. All right, interesting. Yeah. Right, it's clear as a bell. There you go. It's clear as a bell. Yes. Okay, you want it to be Roy Tan, what? Roy Tan, and then you just want it to be you worked in shipping or who worked in shipping? Who worked in shipping, then the comma goes there. Roy Tan, comma, who worked in shipping. Yeah, you're just going to, if it's just Roy Tan, comma, who worked in shipping, the comma still goes there because that still is what we call a non-essential clause, right? Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about, here's our contrasting element, and when the sentence goes on after it, we have to surround it. One comma is no longer enough. If the sentence is going to go on after it, you have to surround it. Deliveries came on Fridays in the summer, and you're going to surround that element. Judge in the middle as direct address, capitalized. You're going to surround it. Weren't you in the middle now with the sentence going on after it? We are going to surround it. The word though is one of those parentheticals, just kind of a throwaway kind of a word. Comma before it if it's by itself. If you're going to go on with it, we're going to surround it. And I always use this example. Many years ago in Arizona, a very long, skinny room with 400 people in it. So this woman was a football field away from me. And she wanted to argue that we really have to look at this and make sure we know what it means. And we really have to put in some semicolons and some, because they're related, and then some dashes, and then some colons, because we know what's coming. And this is what I'm going to say. You are not buying yourself extra readability by doing all of this, by deciding that, oh, but these two are kind of closely related, so I'm going to use a semicolon here rather than a period. Or, you know what, asked and answered, compound and unintelligible, they're all about objection, so I'm going to put a colon. If you're staying up nights doing this, you're not buying yourself a lot of readability. I'd really like you to stay up nights working on stuff, or do it during the day. But you know what? It's really not worth it. This is straightforward. It's readable. It's easily understandable, etc. Yes?
I would possibly put objection, semicolon, ask and answer, compound, unintelligible, because it's describing the objection.
Okay, we said there were 875 comma rules. How many semicolon rules are there? 4. That's it. That's not one of them. Okay? And I always say there are 4. They're very straightforward. They're really straightforward, those rules. And one is about 2 sentences that have no conjunction. Well, this is a little extra. I'm not even going to charge you for this extra little information on semicolons here. Guys, if there are 2 sentences and they look exactly alike, John's from Indiana, Bill's from Tennessee, no conjunction between them, you put a semicolon. He made $5,000, she made $4,000, you put a semicolon. That's rule 1. No conjunction, but the sentences look just alike. They're called parallel. Okay? John works at Sears, he works at Penny's. She works at Penny's. She sent me a letter, he sent me an email. Absolutely parallel sentences, no conjunction, a semicolon goes there. Secondly, a semicolon goes before words like however and moreover and nevertheless when they start a new sentence. Okay, I worked there 10 years, semicolon, therefore, comma, I needed blah, 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 right? However, moreover. That's the second one. The third one is about, I think we're going to do the third one, maybe, I can't remember. And separating two sentences where there's all kinds of punctuation going on over in both sentences. Then you need a semicolon before the and instead of the comma. And the last one's about a series, which we are going to do. Those are the 4 reasons for a semicolon, and only those 4. And I always jokingly say, sometimes I think you guys put in a semicolon because you haven't used one for a while. You're on page 49 and you say, you know what, I know I need some punctuation here, and I haven't used a semicolon for a while, so I'm going to use that. And the reality is that's not one of the rules. And this is just not the place to try to be deciphering what might be. Could this possibly be? Guys, this is simple. It's straightforward. Put periods, move on. You've got other fish to fry. Okay? And then there's the who cares, and that would be this. And for those of you that are as old as I am, or close, the first one was always correct, right? And then about, 15 years ago, it began to be about half and half, and people were beginning to leave it out. And now, the Chicago Manual of Style, the Gregg Reference Manual, it's not there anymore. And so, it's not there anymore. Punctuation changes. How many of you are still putting a comma before to and also at the end of a sentence? It's gone. We don't do that anymore. So, I went with him also. No comma. I know, sorry. I know. It's sad. We'll say a moment of silence, and then we're going to get rid of those commas. Okay? I also went with him, no commas. I went with him to, no comma. And as of the last couple of years, we don't any longer put a comma before junior and senior. At the end, I know. Don't you just hate it? Okay. And this is what I'm going to say. Language changes. This comma has, over the last 10 to 15 years, left us. Maybe we never needed it, but we don't separate this anymore with a comma, and we don't put a pair of commas around it. The comma before to and also at the end of the sentence has actually been gone since the 90s. It's been gone a long time. And I just bought, $60, a new copy of the Chicago Manual of Style, because my other one was from the 80s. And it says we are now dropping those commas around junior and senior at the end of the name. It's going to take a little while for some of us to adjust, isn't it? We're going to go ahead and put them in. My husband actually is a junior. He puts that comma. And the reality is, in another 10 years, you won't be shocked at all. You will just say, well, of course we don't put that comma there. This stuff changes from time to time. It isn't that we can continue to use, mom's punctuation. We have to sort of bring ourselves forward here. Yes? I know. Inc. and LLC and all of those things that come after attorney firm names, generally speaking, around the country, your compatriots are saying, I do it the way the business card does it. If it's an attorney. Okay, first of all, if you're going to put a comma after it, you have to put commas around it. You can't have it, yeah. Okay, then they both have, okay, what I'm saying is, if she's saying, okay, they're not putting a comma after DuPont Inc., you have to put the other one has to go too. You can't just have DuPont Inc., DuPont, comma, Inc., and then go on. If you're going to drop them, they both have to go. And many corporations are dropping them. Most attorney firms, in Los Angeles, I know you think we're weird out there, but in Los Angeles, guys, they don't put a comma between the firm names. Do they not here either? What's up with that? I mean, really, I really don't like that. We have a very large firm in Los Angeles named Paul Hastings, and Paul is the guy's name, his last name. It's not Paul Hastings, it's Paul and Hastings, and Paul is italics and Hastings is not. I know. That's, I'm assuming, because they didn't want to use the comma. I have no idea. But most reporters, what are you guys doing? Are you doing it the way it's on the business card? So if LLC doesn't have periods, you don't put them in. If LLC doesn't have commas around it, you don't put them in, right? Is that what you're doing? Yeah, lots of you are nodding. Okay, yeah. And no, we have a purist sitting back here, and he's saying, no. I'm with him. I would put them in, yes. You have to be very loud. Am I concerned that the attorneys know what the rules? No. Not particularly. I don't think they do. I think there are a few people in this world that know the rules, but I think we're few and far between. I mean, we're a minority in this room because we know punctuation rules. I would just always be open to discussion about that. If an attorney ever mentions it, I sat next to a guy going home one time, and he was dictating, and he was putting in commas and semicolons and dashes, and he's got his little dictaphone. This has been a lot of years ago. So we're landing in LA, and I say to him, do you always put in the punctuation? And he said, oh, I don't have any idea where it goes. He said, my secretary changes it all around. I just like to do it. Okay then. Because he was just putting it in wherever he wanted. He was not putting it in where it belonged. But yeah, I'm always going to be open to discussing that. Anytime that we can educate attorneys in any way, including about punctuation, I'm going to be for that, obviously. Yeah.
Speaking of things that have evolved, I have heard lately that period is no longer period space.
Okay, she heard that there's no longer period, space. I cannot tell you. That came up on Facebook yesterday. It came up last week. Okay, this is the deal, guys. Nothing has changed. This is what happened. We all, some of you didn't, some of us grew up in an era where all we had was a typewriter, okay? A plain old typewriter. It didn't have a dash on it. It didn't have an M dash. It just had a hyphen. So what did we decide to do in court reporting to make a dash? We decided to use two hyphens. We didn't have the long thing, okay? It didn't have italics. Do you remember when the IBM Selectric came out with little balls that you could put in? How many people remember that? Okay, I was beside myself happy. And I am the type who would type along, open the cover, unsnap the ball, take it out, put in the italic ball, snap it in, put the cover down, type one word, 4 letters, take it out, put it back in, and I thought I had died and gone to heaven. We had italics, oh my gosh. And remember that was a typewriter font. We didn't think of it as a font, it was just a typewriter. And for clarity and for ease of reading, in that font, it's called a monofont, which means the I and the M take up the same amount of space on the line. We still use it today in reporting. Why? Because it makes more pages. It absolutely always makes more pages. And so we left 2 spaces after a colon and 2 spaces after a period. Typesetters, and you just haven't noticed, guys, typesetters never did that. Because they don't use a monofont, they don't use a typewriter font, they use a variable font. Sometimes the monofont's called a fixed font. They use a variable font. The I takes up less space than the M, and they're all jammed up against each other. They always used 1 space after the period. We are all becoming aware of that because now we have computers, and how many font selections do you have when you type something? What, 100? I don't know how many of those things there are, but you have a ton of fonts that you can use. And most of them are variable fonts, and they always left 1 space after the period and 1 space after the colon, and they still do. And what's happening is kids are coming home from school and telling parents, you know what, there's only 1 space after a period. And you all are saying, no. Well, no, there's not in reporting because we're using a typewriter font. We always will. First of all, we're pretty slow to change, but secondly, it's always going to make us more pages. So don't ever let anybody talk you into a variable font for your transcript, all right? And it really hasn't changed. It's just that we all now have this access to these variable fonts. And it makes a dash for us now. right? It jerks those two little hyphens together if we want it to. And we can use italics by just doing what? Control I. Yeah, now we have italics, voila. And if we're not doing it today or tomorrow, but if I were going to talk about quotes at length, I would say to you, how many of you are now actually using italics rather than quotes? Because that's what should be used in a lot of places where we're all quoting. Why are we quoting? Because we didn't have italics. And we got into this and all of that. And I always just have to say, how many of us remember carbon paper? Ah, yes. That always brings it. If you don't remember carbon paper, chat with somebody who does. It's always interesting to sort of go back to the carbon paper days. All right. And this is what I call you had to be there punctuation. When you say to me, okay, I just put a comma because I heard a comma. All right. If it's right here, I'm with you. How would we say the first one? We were therefore very much disappointed in him. How would I say the second one? We were, therefore, very much disappointed in him. I would stop. I would pause. I would change what's called the timbre of my voice. How do you spell timbre? T-I-M-B-R-E. The timbre. It's not timber. It's the timbre of my voice, meaning the tone. And I would pause again. Now, how are you going to get these commas in your notes? By putting them in your notes right when it's said. You can't go home and say, oh yeah, I remember that right here he paused. Yep, he sure did. I'm going to put those commas in there. Don't go home and create commas. You are trained. Your brain knows that those commas go there, and it slaps them in there when it hears them. Do not go home and create this set of commas. If you don't have them in your notes, you don't have them. They just don't belong there. It's an absolutely you had to be there. You have to be there. You have to get the commas in your notes, and then they go there. Okay, questions? I'm sorry, if you're going to put in what? The third never, she's asking about what if it's John Smith the third never had commas. The Roman numeral never had commas with it, and I think that's why senior and junior are going to drop it. The third never had any commas, so now we've got junior and senior, and they're going to take those out. I'm objecting, by the way, to their taking them out. I'm not, nobody's quick to change. I'm not happy that they're, actually Mark Kislingberry wrote to me and said, I've heard that the commas are coming out around junior and senior. And I thought, oh no. So I did some research, and sure enough, yeah, they are. It's going to take a little while before we all get used to it. Yes? The word though is a parenthetical sometimes. Sometimes it's, though I haven't seen him for a while, he blah, blah, blah. Then it's not. But when it's at the end of the sentence like that, I haven't seen him, though, again, you're going to drop the voice. You're going to hear that throwaway type nature of that word. Any others that we want to talk about before we launch into something else? Okay, question. Hang on. All right. Okay, his honor, your honor, her honor, I would cap both of them or not cap that first one in all of them. In the court, you know, the rule for capitalizing the word court is very specific. When it refers to a judge and only the judge, no one else there, then it's capitalized. Never the thee. No, never the thee. Yeah, his. Anything in front of honor, if you're going to cap any of them, you're going to cap all of them. His, her, your. Right, not thee. I think you might be thinking about, you cap thee in front of honorable. The honorable so-and-so. Doesn't sound good, does it? The honorable judge, or the honorable Michael Smith. Then you cap the thee there. Cap the thee in front of reverend, the reverend. But no, not in front of court. Okay. Compound construction is two or more elements. It's throughout the language, joined by a coordinate conjunction. There are the coordinate conjunctions. We could get rid of the word for if we wanted to and just talk about and, but, or, and nor. And these things join equal parts. They join things that are the same. So we have on the desk and on the table, that he was tall and that he was thin. These four words, and, but, or, and nor, join things that are the same. Erica. What about what? No, yet and so, and I know some of you were taught this wonderful little thing called fanboys. I always say it's fanbo. There's no why, there's no yet, and there's no so. And we'll talk about that if we have time. Otherwise, we'll talk about it at dinner. Erica and I will talk about it at dinner. But yet and so don't belong in this category because yet and so are adverbs. These words here are not adverbs. They aren't anything but conjunctions. And is a conjunction. Yet and so are adverbs, and they don't go in this category. We're going to talk about the word so because I get asked that. I always say there are 5 questions I get asked at every seminar I give, and one of them is about the word so. So we'll talk about that. All right, so you can say he is tall and thin. You can say I saw Bob and Bill. But the word and, which is sort of the one we're focusing on, the word and cannot connect two things that are different. We cannot say, not even in bad English, we cannot say, he is tall and Bob. We just don't say that. He is tall and Bob doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because and has to connect two things that are the same in our language. Always. Even in bad grammar, it connects two things that are the same. It connects grammatically equal parts, and that's words, phrases, and clauses. There it's connecting words, state and federal, sister and husband, owner and manager. It's connecting phrases in the closet, in the dresser, on Friday, on Monday. Those are prepositional phrases. Or it connects clauses. And as you look at these, we put this word in here. I want you to notice that nowhere do I have a comma before any of these connecting words. I don't have it there, I don't have it here, back here, and I don't have it when there are clauses. When there are dependent clauses joined by one of these words, guys, we don't have a comma before the word. And we'll talk more about that. It connects sentences. It connects complete sentences. And notice what? Oh my gosh, there is a comma. So when it was connecting phrases and clauses and words, there was no comma. When it's connecting sentences, there is a comma. It is called a compound sentence. Two sentences joined into one. Means we don't put a period between them. Okay? So I saw him on the weekend and he was in great shape. Or, but, any one of these words, when it's connecting two sentences, we get a comma before that conjunction. All right. Usually, this is what we get. We get a period at the end of sentences. And one of the things you want to be very careful, and I'm going to wager that almost everyone in this room sometime in the last month has turned a transcript in with a run-on sentence. What does that mean? That means instead of putting a period, you put a comma. And you put a comma for a lot of reasons. And this is the deal. I'm stopping at 12:30, at 2:30, right? Okay. This is the deal. They said this is one sentence. They said he got home late, I don't remember what time. And you didn't get the period in your notes because he went right over the top of it. But when you get ready to scope it or proof it, you have to recognize that these are two sentences and there's nothing in between them to connect them, and you have to put a period. This is where it gets ugly. And why? Because you have a little teeny, is that a sentence? Is that it a sentence? Yeah, it is. Why? Has a subject and a verb and stands by itself. And so you have this whole thing. She called in sick many of those days and never seemed to think she was responsible for the work that didn't get done. That's it. No pause, no nothing, right over the top of it. And you decide, well, I can put a comma there. No, you can't put a comma there. That makes a run-on sentence. And a run-on sentence on the California CSR used to be a 5-point error. You only get 50. Yikes. 4-voice material at 200 words a minute for 10 minutes. That's the California exam. Okay? Hardest exam in the nation as far as I'm concerned because it's 4-voice. It's 4 speakers, it's change of speaker, it's change of examination, etc. And you get 50 errors, 97.5% accuracy, you get 50 errors, and 5 of them you just lost right there. That is an egregious punctuation mistake, to put sentences together with commas. So we're going to put a period there. Put she's right at the end of the sentence. That's a sentence. I know it looks weird to have a big long sentence and a little teeny sentence, but that's still a sentence. So the career path I wanted to follow, period, she's right. No semicolon, no reason for a semicolon there, a period. And there they are. When a coordinate conjunction joins independent clauses, we put a comma before the conjunction. The biggest difference in these two sentences is the word he. When the word he is gone and we just have sent, we don't have anything over here after Monday. We have a comma after Monday when we have the he sent, before we go to her. The problem is, in your punctuating this, is that right here, we tend to get a whole bunch of stuff, right? We tend to get, Andrew called you on Monday, and after he consulted with his partner on the deal that he was proposing, and the two of them decided that blah, 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 and you're hovering, of course, over the keys waiting to put in the comma or not, right? Because you want to put in all punctuation in your notes. No, you can't do that, not here. So he says, Andrew called you on Monday, and after he talked to his partner about the deal they were proposing, and the two of them decided that they would offer you $100,000 more in this deal because they felt it was really worth it, da, 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 da. And we know that that's what a court reporting sentence looks like. That's a really good court reporting sentence, right? And so what you need to do, because you're never going to get this comma in your notes, or if you are, it could be wrong, okay, is you need to wait when you're scoping. You need to come down here and find the subject and verb. Find whether or not you have he sent, and if you do, you bypass all this stuff in here and go all the way back up here and insert a comma. If you don't find any subject over here for sent, then there is no comma up here. Now, what you do with all the stuff in the middle is up, there may be commas in there and stuff, but the reality is this comma here before the and is dependent solely and exclusively on whether you have a subject and verb. Yes? This is cardinal rule number 1 for all of punctuation. This is the most important comma you're putting in the transcript. You are sorting the sentence structure for people. You are separating one sentence from another sentence with a comma. You must be sure that you get this comma right. You put it in when there's a subject and a verb. You don't put it in when there's nothing, when there's just a verb. Now, the rule says sentence in front, sentence after, okay? And this is where I say, sometimes you don't have your own rules, but sometimes we have to take that rule and we have to tweak it. And this is why we have to tweak it here. There's the rule, okay? And we have to tweak it because what if there's no subject and verb in front of that conjunction? What if it's at times, but it did not seem to bother her? So there isn't a sentence out in the front. Maybe it's an answer. Maybe somebody's just picked it up that way. So the statement is at times, but it did not seem to bother her. And my question to you is, do you still put the comma before the but? Because the rule's now sort of out the window. It's not 2 sentences anymore. It's a fragment and then a sentence. Do we still put the comma before the but? How many of you do? Yes. How many of you do not? How many of you haven't even thought about this? Okay, she's going to put a period. Okay. Yeah, there could be a time when there's a period there. Can we leave it with nothing? On the 3rd, and I did not have a clue, it would be the last time. So maybe the question is, when did you see her? On the 3rd, and I didn't have a clue it was going to be the last time. Now, could put a period, all right? Then you're still putting punctuation there. All right, so now I want you to decide how many of you are going to put a comma before that and. And everybody's hand needs to go up, guys. It still has a subject and verb after the and what's in front of it for court reporting purposes, we don't really care. After it, we have a subject and verb. So before it, we need to put a comma. That's the first thing, yeah. No, it's not an introductory phrase because we have an and in there and we're starting a whole new sentence. Not with the but. See, if it were introductory, it would be, at times it did not seem to bother her. But the minute we put the but in there or the and in there, we're separating it from, and now we've got a whole new sentence. Okay? All right, so near the corner, comma, but I didn't see her. Near the corner, but didn't. No comma. It's about the subject and verb that comes after. Yes?
I would put the comma in your first example on that one, and on both those examples, because the first part of that sentence, to me, would be considered an implied sentence. It's not all said, but if, and it's a big if this is the answer to a question. Have you ever been in such and such? I would say at times, but it did not seem to bother her. Meaning, at times I have been such and such.
Right. You're very right about that. Mm-hmm.
So I would call that an implied sentence, and therefore you've got two sentences joined by a conjunction with a comma before.
Okay, that's another way to look at it, and you can do that. What I'm going to say is this comma really depends on this subject and verb, the one after it. And in reality, what's in front of it, we don't really care. Because sometimes they just start a sentence with an and, right? So, and I wouldn't call it an implied sentence. I would call it a fragment. A fragment sentence stands for a complete thought, sort of, but isn't really a grammatically complete thought. And what if we have this situation? Remember, the rule is subject and verb, complete sentence after the coordinate conjunction. So she had not been feeling well, nor, here's our connecting word, had she been at work for some time before and now the attorney jumps in. Now, that's not a complete sentence. The rule says it has to be a complete sentence. So do we put the comma here or not? Same thing here. I've done this surgery several times, and I know that it has been, and it gets interrupted. So now the question is, are you still going to put the comma? How many of you are? How many of you are not? Okay, and the rest of you, I'm assuming, just haven't thought about this for a while. And the reality is, I think we have to tweak our rule for court reporting here and say, yeah, I think we're going to go ahead and put a comma in there. Why? Because, well, we have a subject and verb and we have almost the rest of the sentence. He just got interrupted at the end. I'm going to go ahead and put a comma there. If you choose not to, you also may do that, but I want you to know what you're doing. I want you to know why you're doing what you're doing. Yes? Why am I putting it there? Because there's a subject and a verb after. She had been at work. She had been is the subject and verb. Nor flips over the subject and verb always. Yes?
What if you had taken the dash out the end of the sentence, including ellipses?
Okay. Okay, we're going to talk about the ellipsis a little bit later in terms of trailing off, okay? This is what I want to know. How many of you are making a distinction between an interruption and a trailing off? Okay. And so I am assuming that those of you that are raising your hand say, when he is interrupted, clearly interrupted, I put a dash. When he trails into oblivion, I put an ellipsis. Okay. This is going to come up, I'm not sure where. As I travel around the country, there are people who think, I'm not sure you can see this, that if they trail off, that a dash with a period is appropriate. No. Well, see, you don't live in certain parts of the country. All right. There are places in this country where they feel that if the dash is up against the word, that shows it's trailing off. If you leave a space, that shows he was interrupted. What do you think? No, I didn't think you'd like it. Then there are some people who want 3 hyphens. That shows trailing off, and the dash, the regular dash, shows an interruption. What do you think? No. Okay, so you're voting down all 3 of those. You're so opinionated, you know, really. All right. So 20 years ago, I started giving seminars in 1982. So 20 or so years ago, everyone in this room would have put a dash for trailing off. Because a dash says the sentence got started and did not get finished. That's all it says. It doesn't say, well, he was interrupted, or he trailed off, or he whatever. It says the sentence got started and did not get finished. That's all a dash says. And someone at lunch, remember I told you, 2 of you at lunch, that's how it starts. Somebody somewhere in this United States, these United States, got together for lunch and said, you know, I had this witness who just every single sentence just didn't finish, and I kept putting dashes, but it looks weird, and then the attorney got mad at me because he said I didn't interrupt her all that time. I don't believe attorneys ever even noticed, but okay. And so I'm going to use something different. And several people settled on the ellipsis, and there's a little bit of support for that in the dictionary, a little bit. And so now we have an entire nation of court reporters who are making a distinction, many of them, between the dash for an interruption and ellipsis for trailing off. How many of you do that? All right. I always jokingly say, I don't really have an issue with it. I'm wondering whether it's not just our penchant for really getting into this. But I always say, if you're going to do it, let's start big and work our way down. Like that. I like that. You know, it really does give the idea, but just joking. Okay. I want to, do I have 2 minutes? No, I don't. All right. I wanted to just finish this part. And we'll just still take, okay. There's just one more thing here to show, and that is when there's a little hiccup on the word. Now remember, we're talking about we need a complete sentence after the and, we need a subject and a verb in order to put that comma over here, okay, after foreclose. So what if they do this? What if they just kind of repeat the word it, but that sort of stutter? How many of you are still going to put the comma? How many of you are not? Haven't thought about it. Okay, let's think about it. The rule is if you have a subject and a verb after the and or the but, you're going to put a comma before it, okay? So in this case, he has a subject and verb. He just stumbled over a word. He stumbled over the word my. He said, my job. You have to decide, are you still going to put that comma there or not? And you have to do it all the time, whatever you're going to do. How many of you are going to put that comma in there? I think so. It's a place we have to tweak this language and tweak the rule to fit what we do. You don't put that in a business letter or your PhD thesis. So are you still going to put the comma? I think so. I think that comma is still going to go there, even if somebody just he's not changing his mind, okay, where he's totally starting on a different tangent and I intended. He just kind of slipped over the word. So those are some of the places I think you have to think about tweaking the language. Some of you are looking at me as if I've never thought about any of this. Well, you should, because it comes up all the time. All right, so the rule rewritten for reporting is when there is an independent subject and verb after the coordinate conjunction, you're going to use a comma before the coordinate conjunction. And there are your examples, even when there's a little glitch, even when there's a little, somebody gets interrupted. All right. We're going to take a 15-minute break, is that right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
15 minutes. I have 25 till.
Make sure that you get your card punched at the door. We do have the hole punchers back there.